Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Asperger syndrome. Okay, good. That's more than I thought. So hopefully you guys already know a little bit about it. I'm here to tell you more. The reason I thought it was relevant is because we are in a communications class, and Asperger's has a lot to do with difficulties in communicating. The reason it's relevant for me is because my brother actually has it, so I just thought it was important that I inform you guys a little bit more about it, because I think that with knowledge comes understanding and tolerance. This might be a little bit hard to read, but this is an advertisement that says, "We have your son. We're destroying his ability for social interaction and driving him into a life of complete isolation. It is up to you now, Asperger syndrome." When I saw this, I thought it was a little bit dramatic. The thing about Asperger syndrome is, while it does impair your ability to communicate and especially your nonverbal communication and your social skills, being diagnosed with Asperger's is not a life sentence. It's not like a death threat. You can still live a normal life and have Asperger's. I mean, it's not that big a deal, but it is important that you know that you have it and that you do things to help it. So a little bit of a history. Asperger's was discovered by a Viennese pediatrician named Hans Asperger's in 1944. He noticed the children in his practice who had normal IQ and normal language development, but they did have a few things that seemed kind of odd. And these were their nonverbal communication troubles, the lack of empathy, their poor motor skills, so having trouble picking things up, catching a ball, things like that, and difficulty communicating overall. Now, Asperger's is considered an autism spectrum disorder, and I thought this was a helpful visual because it kind of shows it's under the umbrella term of autism spectrum. So while it's not autistic disorder, which is a little more extreme, Asperger's is a milder form, and it's high functioning, is the important thing to remember about Asperger's. It used to be thought that causes were from the environment and that people could control if they had it or not, and physical factors. So emotional deprivation, it used to be thought, there's something wrong with you, you're emotionally deprived, and that's why you have trouble with your social skills, and that's not true. And another thing that was popular in the 50s and 60s was this poor parenting myth, and it's that, if you didn't foster your child's growth, if you weren't really there for your child, they would develop Asperger's. But it was found later on that Asperger's is due to neurobiological factors. So brain abnormalities at the National Institute of Health, they found through MRIs that there are some differences in the brains of someone with Asperger's as opposed to someone without it. And also, there's a group of genes that they found that affect your susceptibility. So it's not a specific gene, but it may be a group of genes whose variations or deletions make someone more likely to have Asperger's. And I thought this was a helpful visual. So there are kind of three categories I'm going to be talking about. Asperger's affects your communication, your socialization, and your imagination. The first thing is your social interaction. So as you can see, this girl is kind of isolated. There are the people in the background, and she's just kind of staring out the window. So some of the things that come with the troubles that Asperger's brings in social interaction, the first thing is their inability to read nonverbal social cues. So, for example, body language is a big part of communication. If you're talking to someone and they're tapping their foot, that signals that they don't want to talk to you. People with Asperger's have a lot of trouble picking up on these social cues, and that makes it really hard to communicate. Another thing is they have trouble with empathy. So it's not that they don't feel it, it's that they have trouble conveying it, and they have trouble identifying with other people's feelings. And the last big thing in the social interaction issue is that these things often lead to isolation. And it's not that they don't want to talk to people, it's just that they have trouble doing it. Now, complications in communicating. I thought this was a funny visual because it has to do with one of the things, avoiding eye contact. So right now, when you get up and give a speech, eye contact kind of seems hard, but it's not painfully hard. For someone with Asperger's, it's really, really hard to look someone in the eye. It takes a lot of prompting, it takes a lot of coddling. Another thing is, it's hard for them to express their emotions. And when I was researching, I found an analogy that I thought was good for this class. People with Asperger's, it's like delivering a speech. You know the speech, but when you get up, you fumble. You don't know how to express it. Another thing with Asperger's is peculiar mannerisms or speech patterns. So a lot of people will have like either flailing arms or they'll do like weird body movements. And as for their speech patterns, they'll usually be monotone or they'll have unusually advanced vocabulary for their age. And these all tie into not knowing how to communicate. And the last thing is people with Asperger's do display a lot of behaviors that would seem odd to a lot of us. So the first is that they'll have rigid, repetitive behaviors. So they'll have schedules that they need to stick to. It's not flexible. They'll have weird sensory reactions, so they might be really sensitive to the light in this room. Poor motor skills, so like catching and throwing. And fixations on certain objects. So this boy is really fascinated with molecular structure, which is kind of bizarre. Now diagnosing, it's hard to diagnose and treat because it may just be that someone is shy. But a specialist will look at the symptoms, they'll look at the family history, their motor skills, things like that. And basically to sum it up, Asperger's does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. It is different, but just because you have it doesn't mean you're defective. It's just something, unusual about you, like, oh, I'm left-handed, something like that. A lot of people with Asperger's have really good grammar and vocabulary, and as for like their bizarre interests, a lot of them go on to develop that into a field that they can make their professional field. But a lot of them do have trouble like in relationships, establishing independence, adjusting to change. And the treatment, it's really important just to catch Asperger's early on so you can remedy these things. I'll just go through it quick. Cognitive behavior therapy, they'll give you a situation, they help you understand what to do in certain social situations. Floor time is really effective. It's basically parents fostering their growth and not trying to change their child, but help them develop the way that they are. So an example with their odd fixations, help them develop that into a profession. And don't try to, make them normal. Social skills training, that pretty much speaks for itself. Teaching them how to socialize, interact with people, verbally, non-verbally. And of course, with Asperger's, it's often diagnosed with things like ADHD, ODD, depression, etc. So medication can be given for that. And then again, the outlook. Some of them will struggle with jobs, but if they channel their interest into a profession, they're successful. They may have a little trouble with friendships and relationships, but with work, it's nothing that they can't overcome. They just need a little more encouragement, and like I said, the public speaker example, that's basically it with Asperger's. It's nothing that's wrong with them, it's just trouble communicating and knowing what to say. Should I X out?
Yeah. All right, now thank you guys.
I think I get this out.
If I what?
I like